Just worship our Savior this morning. Just sing with me, all together. Reaching out to welcome you, God. Fill this place again with your song. Flood our thoughts with wonder and awe. Give us a greater glimpse of an ever-changing God. Till all we want, let's sing it out. Till all we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. Oh, it's found in you. Open wide our hearts now to yours. Every fear bow down to your love. For we will sing like never before. Give us a greater glimpse of an ever-changing God. And let's sing this tune. Till all we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. Oh, it's found in you. And only the presence of Christ, sing it. And in your presence there is freedom. And in your presence we are made whole. Sing it again. And in your presence there is freedom. And in your presence we are made whole. Yeah. All we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. All we want and all we need is found in you, found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. Oh, it's found in you. Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good. You sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the beating of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, yeah, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, 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 yeah, you are good, good. Oh, yes, you are good, good. Oh, yeah, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. When the night is holding on to me, God is holding on. Amen. This is Matthew 18:12. If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go look for the one that wandered off? If you would bow your head and close your eyes for a moment. Just spend a moment in prayer, thanking God for a personal love for you, each and every one of us. For chasing after you even when you've wandered away. For loving you no matter what, even when you don't deserve it. Thank him for these things. God, we thank you for such a personal love. God, a love that we can't even fully understand. God, to our finite minds, a love that leaves the 99 for the one seems reckless, but God, you know it's perfect. Thank you for a perfect, reckless love for us, God. Right now, we praise you for that. Before I spoke a word, You are singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. For I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so, so kind to me. Thank Him for His love. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. He's a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. It's a God that loves us no matter what. Sing. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You've been so, so good to me. I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so, so kind to me. Praise Him right now. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves a 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. Be seated.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? It is awesome to see you guys in the house of God today, man. We have a bunch of people here who are visitors. I had a kid when I was in youth ministry at a very young age I think I was 19. Cole, where are you in your group, man? Stand up because the lights are bright and you just look like a black dot. This is my boy, Cole Calloway. He's preached here a little bit. Back in the day when we were in the other side, Cole was one of my students when, like I said, I was 19 years old and in college, still trying to find my way. And now Cole is going to plant a church in Moberly, Missouri, which is really cool. So, yeah. It's always cool to see when God continues to do what God continues to do. We are in week 2 of our series called Little Things. And just to give you a little idea, if you weren't here last year, if you weren't here last week, we were talking about little things in our life that make a massive difference, right? Little things that God said in Scripture, like you need to have faith of a mustard seed, and sometimes little ideals that God places through Scripture that absolutely are revolutionary for our life if we will listen to them, right? One of the little things that I want to talk about this week is split-second decisions. The split-second decisions are the moment that happens in the middle of a second when you have to make this really quick choice about how you're going to live your life and the choices that you're going to make. It's within the middle of that second that a lot of us will define who we are and what our life will look like. And we only get one shot at this life, so we gotta do it right. Give you some ideas of split-second decisions that are famous. There's a little lady named Mahalia Jackson that back on August 28th, I think of 1963, she was at a rally with a guy named Martin Luther King. And at that rally, Martin Luther King was pouring his heart out, and he was talking about all the things that he wanted to see in society. And little Mahalia Jackson leans over and she goes, "Martin, tell him about your dream." And Martin Luther King backs up and he gets real quiet. He surveys the entire crowd and he goes, "I have a dream." And boom. Mahalia Jackson's little split-second decision changed the entire universe for African Americans as we know it. Here's another one for you, the Titanic. Everybody knows that story, saw that movie 20 years ago. If you're in this room and you didn't see that movie 20 years ago, just be glad you're young and shut up. Anyway, but the rest of us, right, we saw that movie, the Titanic, and an interesting story about that. On the day that it was getting ready to leave port, there was a guy who was in charge of standing on the edge of the boat watching for obstacles that were going to be in the way. And so that guy had a pair of binoculars that were locked in a cabinet down in the bottom of the ship. At the very last minute, he had to leave the ship before it left port, and they replaced him with another guy, and that guy took off with the keys that held the cabinet, that held the binoculars, and the guy who watched for large obstacles that night had nothing to look far away and see what was going to happen, and in a split second, it ruined the Titanic. Things happen in split seconds, not just in famous quotes and in famous moments, but sometimes in our life. Jared Prindle was a part of the band today. Jared was another kid that was in my youth group. Now he's on staff as our student pastor. We both knew a guy named Ben. Ben was a kid that was in my youth group in Oak Grove, Missouri. One of my favorite kids I ever had. Man, Ben was a nut, and he would do anything crazy. And if you wanted to, he broke his nose water skiing one time because he was always just taking risks. Well, Ben got upset one day down in Springfield. He had a really fancy Mustang, and in a split-second decision decided to floor it. The pavement was a little wet. He spun out of control, broke his neck, and passed away. And it's in those split-second moments when we don't expect something huge to happen that something huge happens. It's the moment that splits the seconds. And what we're going to find today as we look in the Scripture is we're going to find a very telling one that is just screams out that we have to really pay attention to the split-second moments. You go all throughout history, you're going to find out of the Bible, you're going to find split-second moments. Our book starts, our life book starts with a split-second moment that was a bad choice when Eve and Adam decided to eat an apple. Right? But the one we're going to look at today is in the book of Judges. It's one of my favorite stories. It's the story of Samson. And if you don't know who that is, then man, I don't know how you don't know who that is. Even people who don't go to church much know Samson is. He's a dude with all the hair and all the muscles. We're not talking about Fabio. We're talking about Samson, right? And so Samson, man, if you're a kid that grew up in church especially, I always wanted to be like Samson. I had it all minus the muscles and the hair. But other than that, I had it down. And Samson is one of those guys who we look at him and there's a part of him that is so attractive, right? There's a part of him that all of us want to be like, and then there's a part of us that all of us draw away from because all of us know the story about Samson and Delilah, right? And it is that split-second decision that marked and molded and created the destiny of Samson. If you don't know that story, let me tell it to you real quick. I'm going to tell you the end, and then I'm going to reverse back and kind of show you how he got there. If you don't know the story of Samson, here's what you're going to find in Judges chapter 16. You will find that for the third time, this lady named Delilah looks at Samson and says, I want to know the secret of your strength. You see, Samson had tons of muscles, Samson had tons of hair, and everybody knew him as this bigger-than-life figure. And the Philistines wanted to destroy him, and she is the pawn that they used to do it. And she looks at him and she goes, tell me the secrets of your strength. And in that moment, Samson goes, man, you got to cut off my hair. And we know the rest, right? The Philistines, they run in, they cut all of his hair off, they gouge his eyes out, and in that split-second decision, it puts him in prison. But here's what I would like you to see. We all know the split-second decision that Samson made, but I don't think it's in that split-second decision that decision was made. I think it's in the split-second decisions that he had many times before that decision was ever made that caused him to make that decision in that moment, at that time, that would destroy every part of the rest of his life. So if we can, we're going to do a little rewind, right? And we're going to go back in the life of Samson, and we're going to look at him as a child. And I want to show you how it was many split-second decisions that lasted to the one that just happened to be the one that just destroyed him. If you got your Bibles, do me a favor. Go to Judges chapter 13. We're going to be in verse 1, okay? Judges chapter 13, verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren, and they had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive, and you will bear a son. Therefore be careful, and don't drink wine or strong drink, and don't eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb. Now, a lot of us know the story of Samson this way. We know that Samson had muscles, and we know that Samson had hair, but we don't necessarily know why those two things are important. Here's why. Samson, by God, was chosen to take a Nazirite vow. A Nazirite vow is a part of a Jewish custom, okay? When you go in and you look at Israeli and Jewish history, you will find that they have tons of ceremonies they go to, tons of festivals they go to where they remember who God is in their life. And they use these festivals, these symbols, to draw them close and closer to God. And the Nazirite vow is no different. Here's the interesting thing about the Nazirite vow. If you took a Nazirite vow, you didn't drink, you didn't shave, and you didn't touch dead stuff. All right? And we would look at that and we would go, well, that's kind of random. Why does anybody care about hair and drinking and dead stuff? It's really interesting when you look at it. A Nazirite vow is a vow that men would take that would separate them 1,000,000 miles away from being separated from God. And when you look at the Nazirite vow of just the drinking part, why did God care about drinking? When you go back and you look at the Nazirite vow, here's what you're going to find. That not only could they not drink, they couldn't touch grapes, they couldn't eat a raisin. A person that took a Nazirite vow, anything that would create alcoholic beverages, they were not allowed to put in their mouth. Why? Because we, as a Nazirite vow, they were taking and making a decision to stay 1,000,000 miles away from the line. Why ever eat a raisin? Because a raisin could lead to this, could lead to this, could lead to, I'm drunk. And so as a symbolic just statement to God that I want to be 1,000,000 miles away from anything that would trip me up from you, I am not even going to eat a raisin because I want to be that close to you. Same way with the dead carcasses and bodies. A person that took a Nazirite vow could not go to a funeral. If their loved ones died, they weren't allowed in the house. They weren't supposed to go within so many feet of a dead body. Why? Because dead bodies looked at and were viewed as a lack of life. And where do we know life comes from? It comes from God. And so a Jewish person would go, I'm going nowhere near death because I don't ever want to get far away from the life that I have in God. And so I will never go near something dead. I'm going to make a vow, and every time I see something dead, I'm going to run the other way because it's going to remind me that my job is to run the other way towards Jesus or God in that aspect because Jesus was on the scene in the New Testament. Why did he not shave his head? Why was that a big deal? If you go into old Israeli culture, here's what you're going to find. An Israeli woman would wear protection over her head. And it was a representation that she was covered and protected by first her husband and then God. Well, God and then her husband, okay? And we are what? We are the bride of Christ, right? We are the bride of God. We are his bride. And so a Nazirite vow was taken as a representation that they would not take anything off of their hair because their hair was a symbolic statement that God protected them, right? And the longer their hair got, the greater their protection from God became. And an interesting thing, a Nazirite vow always had a beginning, except for in the life of Samson because God called it forever. But a Nazirite vow that was taken by a man there was always a beginning and an end, kind of like a fast. And the very first thing that a person would do when they ended a Nazirite vow is they would cut all their hair off and they would lay it on the altar as a sacrifice. The priest would sacrifice it and set it on fire before God because it was a representation that God, you are my strength. That even when I cut off my hair, I want to be in your presence because you are everything. You are my sustenance. You are my salvation. You are my protection. Now, we look at that in our culture and we go, that's a lot of work just to tell God you love him. That just seems like a lot. Right? I mean, never eat a grape, Matt. Are you serious right now? Isn't that kind of folksy and religious? Well, I don't know. And today I want to take the scripture and kind of show you why. I think it's incredibly imperative that there are Nazirite moments in our life. They stop us. Nazirite moments stop us from that moment in between the seconds when it's split and we make a decision that will destroy our life. When you look at the life of Samson, here's what we know. Even though he was given a Nazirite vow, Samson struggled with an issue. And his issue was Philistine women. Now, his job and his goal and his design, the Bible, we just read it. God said, I have created Samson. I want him to take a Nazirite vow. I have created him because he is going to defeat the Philistines. Isn't it amazing that sometimes the things that draw us away from God most are the things that God has called us and raised us up to defeat in our lives? But for Samson, he was always drawn to Philistine women. And you know what? Samson was a respected dude. The Bible tells us that for 20 years, he ruled as a judge. Everybody that looked at him in town went, that dude's got it figured out. I mean, look at the muscles, look at the hair. He's the judge. But every so often, and maybe you can relate to this, nighttime would fall, and Samson would trek into places he didn't belong, like Philistine land. He would walk across the line when nobody was looking, and he'd find him a woman. It started early on with his dad. If you got that verse in chapter 14, can you pull this up for me? Chapter 14, Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah, this is one of the days when he wandered into the Philistine territory, and at Timnah, he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines, okay? And then he came up and he told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines of Timnah. Go get her for me. I want her to be my wife. That sounds so country, doesn't it? Go get her, all right? And it gets a little more country here. You ready? But the father and the mother said to him, and don't we have a relative that you like? I mean, do you see that? But the father and the mother said to him, I can't read it from there. Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives? That is so like, I don't know. Anyway, and among all our people that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. Now look at this next statement. I think it's so important that you see this. What does it say? For she is right in whose eyes? My eyes. Right? Not God's eyes. Man, I know God chose her for me. That is God's choice for my life. No. He says, see, at nighttime, I travel down into the Philistine lands, and while I'm down there sometimes, I see these women, and it just feels right. How many times have you done something in your life that is sinful and you just do it because it feels right in the moment? That's Samson. You in so many ways, and I in so many ways, are just another Samson. So time after time, we find Samson delving into Philistine land when he doesn't belong in Philistine land. The Bible says there's two accounts that his dad actually gets him this woman to be his wife. He goes down and he marries her, and, you know, his goal and his lot in life is to destroy Philistines. So, you know, even though he loves Philistine women, he loves to make it hard life on the Philistine people, and they hate him for it. So sooner than later, his wife gets burned to death because she is by the Philistine people because she's connected to him. After he loses her, we find another story where he finds a prostitute. And after he lays with her, there's one more evening when he just kind of goes, hey man, this whole Philistine thing has worked out not so bad. I mean, yeah, the one got caught on fire, but the rest of them, it's been great. And in the middle of the night, he travels down into Philistine land one more time. and he meets a woman by the name of Delilah. Judges 16, verse 4, and here's what it says. After this, what is after this? After he met the prostitute, okay? You can read up if you want to. After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. You know, it doesn't say in the other one, man, he fell in love with a woman and she burned to death. He's like, you know, I like that one, but she got caught on fire, but that's okay because I really love this one, okay? And after this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, now watch this, every single time you go into Philistine land, and let me say this because I don't think I've said this yet this morning, and I need to say it. I'm going to say it a bunch. Every single one of us have a Philistine land. Every single person that sits in here, there is a Philistine land that when things aren't going right, when you're stressed out, when you need to do something just to kind of fill your pleasure need, you head to Philistine land, don't you? And everybody's Philistine land looks different. For Samson, it was a sexual thing. For some of you, it may be an alcohol thing, or it may be a drugs thing, or it may be you love new cars and you have gotten yourself into financial ruin going and buying new cars, or it may be clothing, or it may be food. We all have a different Philistine land. I have Philistine lands. Man, as I read this and I put this together, I thought, gosh, man, this is so pertinent, not just for them, you guys, but for me. And here's what it says, and he loved this woman named Delilah, and the Lord of the Philistines came to her and said, seduce him. See where we can get his great strength. Every single time you walk into Philistine land, can I tell you this? You are placing yourself in the hands of the devil. You basically are saying this, the same thing Samson said. God, I know you wrote a story for me, and I know that story is fantastic, and I know that it's got great plans, but I don't know that I can trust those plans, so I'm going to go down in my Philistine land because I really enjoy that moment, and right now I'm ready to trade that moment for eternity. Only you don't realize you're saying that, but that's what you're saying. And Samson goes into the land of the Philistines once more, and he meets Delilah, and the next thing he knows is he's got a major love affection thing going on, and she doesn't love him at all. How do we know that? We know that because of the fact that 5 guys came to her and said, if you will betray him, we'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver. You know how much 1,100 pieces of silver is? That is $90,000 per person. Think about that. She was going to walk out of this thing a fat cat. $90,000 per person that was standing there that day. And the thoughts are by theologians that 4 to 5 guys were standing there. Do the math. That's incredible. So what else is she going to say? Because she doesn't have a love life with God. She's not intimately connected to God. And so here's what happens. So Delilah said to Samson, Samson, tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound that one could subdue you. What a stupid idiot, right? Can we just be honest? Samson, tell me, if I was, let's just talk theoretically. Theoretically, if I had a bunch of guys standing in the closet and I wanted you to be tied down so that nothing could hurt, nothing you could get out of, how would I go about that? We look at that sometimes, don't we, and we go, what a moron. But here's what it is, and I think you need to understand this, is Samson wasn't a moron. Samson was incredibly strong. Samson was incredibly handsome. Samson had never been subdued by a Philistine in his life. Samson had the power of God on his life. And so every single time that somebody came up against Samson, it was no big deal. Samson's pride had raised so high that he thought he was indestructible. Can I tell you something that Satan will do to you? Satan will convince you through your pride that you're okay. Satan will tell you through your pride that you can get through what you're going through and you can walk into Philistine land and it's going to be okay. Satan will tell you that nothing's going to come of harm to you and it's a lie from the pits of hell because you are bound and ready to be ruined every single time you walk into Philistine land. The problem with Samson is he'd walked into Philistine land so many times and been okay. So when she says this, he's like, okay, was this some kind of joke or some kind of new move you're making on me? What is this, right? So Samson said to her, well, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak. And he makes this statement. And I don't think he realized how deafening this statement was. I will become like any other man. Do you see what Samson's saying here? I will become average. Samson was sitting in the Philistine land because he was okay with being average. I think a lot of times Christians, we're okay with just being average. Man, I just want to make it. God did not design you. He did not create you. He did not make you just to make it. He made you to thrive. And he's penned this novel for your life that is fantastic and amazing and beyond anything you can even imagine. And all you got to do is follow it. And sometimes we are so okay with just average. Samson was no different. Samson said, if they tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and like any other man. And then the Lord of the Philistines brought to her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been bound, and she bound him with them. And now she had been lying in ambush in an inner chamber, and she said to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the bowstrings like threads of flax snaps when it touches fire. And so the secret of his strength was not known. And so Delilah looks at him and said, you've mocked me and you told me lies. Please tell me how to bind you. And he lied to her again. If they bind me with new ropes, it's all about new ropes. I'll become like any other man. I'll just be average. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And the men lying in ambush were in an inner chamber, but he snapped the ropes off like a thread. Do you see this, how dumb we get when sin happens? There are men standing in a closet in the middle of his love affair. Okay, if that's not weird enough, that when she says the Philistines are upon you, they run out of the closet and they try to subdue him, and then when they realize he's strong, they go, oh, and they run away? What kind of weird story is that? Right? It's just weird. Now watch this. Then Delilah said to Samson, until now you've mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, well, if you weave the 7 locks of my hair with the web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and like any other man. In other words, if you take my hair and you wind it into a sewing machine, then you know what? I'm going to be subdued and there's nothing I can do. Don't miss this moment, okay? I think this is one of the most telling things I'm going to tell you today. Every single time you walk into Philistine land, you give a piece of your heart away. Look what he does right here. In that moment, he tells a small secret to his strength, does he not? He doesn't tell her, cut my hair, but he says, it's about my hair. He says, you know, if you take the 7 locks of my hair, she now knows he's got 7 locks that need to be cut off. And it's like this, every single time you make the decision or I make the decision to walk into Philistine land that we know is wrong and yet we delve into it anyway, here's what happens. We give a piece of the story that God has written for us away to Satan and we don't get it. And right in this moment, Samson's just giving it away. And Delilah yells, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. He gets up and he rips it apart. He's like, look at me, dude. I am Samson. Check out the hair. Check out the body. I got it all. Little did he know, and little do we understand that split-second moments are never led up by a big announcement. Hey, here comes the split-second moment. Split-second moments happen in a split-second moment. And the next moment that he's going to spend in this story is going to be the split-second moment that destroys his life. It's one too many times in the Philistine territory. It's one too many times leaving what God had protected him and set him out to do. It's one too many times of marring the story that God had given him. And now all of a sudden, where does he find himself? One too many times in the wrong place. And here's the deal. We never get to that moment without warning. Some of you, you're walking through Philistine moments right now. I just know it. And you're sitting there and you go, oh, I know my Philistine moment. And it has not been that you've gotten here without warning. How many times do the Philistines got to run out in the room before he probably goes, this is not a good idea? Let me take you a little bit farther just before I get to this next statement. And when she said to him, how can you say I love you? Verse 15, when your heart is not with me, you've mocked me 3 times. It's getting stupid, Samson. And you have not told me where your great strength lies. And when she pressed him with her words day after day and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. Can I just tell you, I hope this isn't your wife. Women, don't be offended. I'm just saying, she talked to him and nagged him and nagged him and nagged him, and he went, oh my gosh, just shut up. That's basically what this is saying. And he told her with all of his heart. He said to her, a razor has never come upon my head. Now look at these next statements. Don't miss this. A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been what? a Nazirite. I've been separated away just for the sole purpose of God. Man, if anything is going to get Samson's mindset right now, it is that statement. It is where he would go, man, a razor's never touched my head because I'm a Nazirite. I got to go home. And it should have been in that moment where he turns and he runs, right? But he didn't run. He didn't run. In 2010, my wife and I and my family started the trek from Augusta, Georgia to Dallas, Texas, because I was going to become one of the youth pastors at Prestonwood Baptist Church. It's this church of about 17,000 people on a Sunday morning. Easter Sunday, they'll hit like 30,000 people, a ton of people. And as I'm driving, my boss calls me and he goes, hey, dude, I just want to give you a heads up. There's some crazy crud going on around here and you're walking right in the middle of it. I go, well, what's that? And he goes, the median adult pastor, which means middle adult, 40 to 55 years old, that pastor was arrested today because he took an extra large box of Trojans, if you know what I'm saying. I'm trying to keep this family rated. He took an extra large box of Trojans and a webcam. He went to Waco, Texas, and he was part of a Dateline sting. And he was arrested for trying to proposition a 13-year-old little girl. And I get to church. I'm not kidding you. We had this big, massive stadium kind of church. They called it Six Flags Over Jesus. It's a joke. You guys are slow today. And I walk in, and there's Fox, NBC, CBS, CSNBC. I mean, you name the affiliate. They were all across the lower bowl of the auditorium. As my pastor tries to explain why one of our pastors went down and tried to proposition a 13-year-old little girl. And I tell you that story because of this story. The day that he got arrested at 11 o'clock in the morning, he had a meeting in the office of a guy named Neil Jeffrey. And it was in that office that Neil Jeffrey and he were helping a guy getting ordained to go in the ministry. You have to study to get this ordination certificate thing. And they ask you some hard questions. And Neil was in that room and he looks at the guy that was being ordained in the eye and he goes, is there anything in your life that you could tell me right now that would stop you from being effective in ministry? Do you have an addiction of some kind? Is there porn in your life? You know, do you have a struggle with women? We want to get somebody in your life to help you so that this never trips you up, because we all have Philistine land, people, right? And Neil goes, when I got done, I looked at Joe for some reason. I said, how about you, Joe? Is there anything going on in your life that we need to know about that would destroy you? Because let's just get it out in the air right now and let's deal with it. And Joe said no. Got up, walked out of that office, walked into his office, picked up his supplies, headed to Waco, and in the moment that splits the moments, Joe's life was over. Look at this. At a moment when Samson knew he should walk away because he had taken a Nazirite vow, Samson walked anyway. He said, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength is gone, and I shall be weak and like any other man. I will just become average. Little did he know how average he was going to become. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all of his heart, she sent and she called the Lord of the Philistines, saying, come up again, for he's told me everything. And then the Lord of the Philistines came up and brought her the money and put it in her hands. And she made him sleep on her knees. Isn't that what sin sometimes just feels like? It's just so pleasurable that it's like you're just laying your head down in a nice little green pasture of grass and there's nothing that could go wrong. Little did he know that was the most dangerous time he'd ever laid his head down in his life. Because she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of Samson's head. And she began to push on him. Samson, get up, dude. She began to torment him. And his strength had left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and he said, I'm going to go out as I always have. But there's a deafening statement right here. And here's what it says. But he did not realize that the strength of God had left him. By the time Samson was born, he was given a Nazirite vow. By the time Samson got to this moment, he had broken every single vow of the Nazirite code. He'd gotten drunk, he'd touched dead bodies, and now the last thing that he had, which was the protection of God, the hair that covers his head, that is his strength, that is his salvation, that is his sustenance, he lays it down. And he gets up like always before, I am fine, but he is far from fine. Because in the moment that splits the moment, Samson gave it all away. And the Bible says that they ran in and they grabbed him and they gouged out his eyes. I often wonder, what was the last thing that Samson saw in his life? I bet it was Delilah. I'll bet it was his Philistine love. I bet it was the one thing that he never thought could trip him up. It was the one thing that in the moment of moments could never get to him, and now it had finally gotten to him, and the last thing that he would ever see in his life was his Philistine love. Some of you, you have your eyes dead set on your Philistine love. Some of you teenagers, you have a Philistine love of kids at school that build up your reputation and your self-esteem, and you know you don't need to be with them, and you're with them anyway. And they are ruining you, and there's going to be a moment within a moment in which your life is going to change because of the choices that you're making. There's a man in here or a woman in here that keep going out to lunch with somebody by themselves, thinking that it's okay to go out to lunch with somebody of the opposite sex. Nothing's going to happen. I am fine. That's what Samson said. And you don't know the moment that splits the moment in which, oh my gosh, how did I get here? There's some of you that if we went home right now and looked at your computer, there's been Philistine land that you have traveled down to many nights. And every single time you go, it takes a part of your heart of God away. And that moment within a moment is on its way. You just don't know when it's going to come. There's some of you in here that you're drinking, and you think you're fine. I can handle it. I wonder if everybody on the outside views you like they viewed Samson. Why in the world would he do that? Well, let's be honest. You've been doing it for so long, you think it's okay and you're going to make it, and it's all good. But it's not all good. Because the moment that splits the moment is on its way. And what will happen when that occurs? Some of you, man, you're struggling with finances. And you keep going back to the well and buying things you can't afford, and you've gotten yourself so deep in credit card debt, you're like, I don't know what to do. And you're thinking about buying that another outfit or that next car, that bigger house. And you're going, how in the world am I going to afford this? But I got to have it. And it could be that moment within the moment in which you go, yes, I will take it, that sets you back for years. So how do we stop that from happening? How do we take Samson back to the beginning? I think that's the only way to stop it from happening is go back to the beginning of Samson's story. Here's how we stop those things from ever happening. You ready? You remember I told you at the beginning, we all kind of probably think it's stupid that a person with a Nazirite vow never even eats the grape? Some of us that have money issues, you don't need to ever own a credit card. You don't need to ever buy anything that you can't buy with the cash. Because anything that's on a loan will ruin you. And why even eat the raisin? Why even have the grape? Some of you are sitting in here with sexual sin problems. Why do you even own a phone? Well, Matt, I live in the media generation. I got to have a phone. I mean, how could I not survive? Man, we survived for a lot of years without one. And if it is going to be the moment within the moment that just takes you and destroys you, don't even put the grape in your life. Don't eat the raisin. And yet we sit here and we go, but man, that is so hard. I'll tell you what's hard. Is some dude taking an ice pick and digging out your eyes. That's hard. And we are all on a journey towards that unless we step back and separate ourselves from the things that can destroy us. So how do we do this? I don't think you need to make a Nazirite vow in every area of your life, okay? I'm not saying that. But in the areas that you travel down to, which are Philistine lands, why would you not make a Nazirite vow in those areas? Man, maybe money's not your issue. You can have a credit card. Awesome, great, go for it. I'm not against credit cards. I'm not against any of this. Well, some of it I am, but not all of it, right? But here's the deal. If we know that it's destructive to our lives, right, why would we venture down those roads? Why would we not put stopgaps in place that says, God, I want to be so connected to you? And here's the deal. We all know our Philistine land, don't we? I know my Philistine land. You know your Philistine land. You know your Philistine land. You know yours. And every single time you travel down, it pulls a piece of your heart away from who God is in your life. It steals a little bit of your story. Why would I want anything to steal my story? God has written a novel for Matt Bardig. God has written this story that I can't even compute in my mind and even come up with on my own that is so spectacular and so fantastic. Why would I want to mar it up with my choices of walking into Philistine jungles? But that's what I do sometimes. And that's what you do sometimes. But what if we said, God, I'm going to make a Nazirite vow in that area of my life. Here is the pen back. I want you to write the story, God. I want you to have complete control over my life. I want you to write it. I don't want to write it anymore. At whatever cost it takes, God, I am walking out of this Philistine land. I am never coming back. And God, I am setting myself apart for you, God. There's a lot of Joes sitting in this room today. You remember my friend Joe from Prestonwood? You're in the office right now with Neil Jeffrey. And God is warning you like he warned Samson when he said, oh man, I've had a Nazirite vow since the beginning. And this is your warning. This is your flare, right? Get out of the Philistine land. Separate yourself from the Philistine land. Hand the pen back to God and let him write your story and just watch how he blows you away. Why? Because at the end of the story, here's the thing we know about Samson. The Bible tells us that as time went on, Samson was shackled to a mill grain where he just pushed it all day long and made grain. And finally his hair began to grow and his strength came back, and they would take him to parties and mock him. They'd make him dance for them and do all kinds of stuff, and his hair began to grow back. And the Bible says that they took him to a temple and he asked, can you lean me against a pillar? And the Bible says what, we've read so many times, and a lot of us just love this part of the story, where Samson just gets his retribution and he pushes the pillars apart and destroys all the Philistines, and oh my gosh. And the Bible also says that day Samson died. And then this is the part we celebrate, but he killed more Philistines than ever before. But what would have happened had he not just tricked into Philistine land? Would anybody have died? I don't know. Would Samson have died? Probably not. Probably he would have been celebrated. He would have been in Hebrews chapter 11. He would have been the guy that was the judge, that was strong, that was muscular, that was hairy, that everybody loved. But now he's just a guy. He's just average, like any other man. Do you want to be average? Or do you want the entire story that God has written for you? Do you just want to kind of float and hope that moment between the moments never happens? Or do you want the best that God has to give you? Then do a Nazirite vow against your Philistine. Don't ever walk there again. Give God the pen and let him do it. Now, some of you are sitting in here, last thing I'm going to say, some of you are sitting in here and you're going, but that story, that's me. I have already had that moment between the moments. And it may be true. There may be some moments which you have stolen away from your story. But God is still big and he will still finish the story. He finished the story with Samson. It just didn't look quite the same. God has a story for you that is not done. And let me say this. There's an overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love that God has for you. And you may be right now riddled right in the middle of Philistine land. You may be going, I don't know which way's up. I don't even know how to get out of here, Matt. I am so trapped. I don't know what to do. And God will leave the 99. And he will come and rescue you. But here's what it takes for you to realize that long ago, God set you apart with a story, and you need to do everything you can to separate yourself from the world right now in this moment to allow him to do what he needs to do in your life. Will you do me a favor? Will you bow your head and close your eyes for just a moment? I don't see this day as a day when we put this big invitation out, because what am I going to say? Hey, stand up and tell me your Philistine issue. I'm not looking for that. But I just want to pray over you. Because hear me when I say this, if you hear anything else again. You are in a Joe moment. You will either get up from here and go live your life just like you always have, or you will begin to put Nazirite vows in your life about the areas that you struggle with. And you don't know when you walk out today, if you make a Joe moment, that your next choice is not the moment that splits the moments and ruins you forever. Can I just encourage you in this moment? Just be humble. Just say, hey, God, I need you. I want your story, God. I want to have everything that you have for me. God, I want to be in the middle of the moment with you. I don't want to be cheated out of my story, God, because I find myself too much in places I don't really want to be in the first place. And for some of you, it's going to be some hard, sacrificial choices that are not going to feel good. But the long run of it is you're going to have an amazing story written by God, not by you. Right now in this moment, just tell God, God, I want to be the one. Come after me, God. Leave the 99. Come grab my heart. Come grab my hand, God. I'm tired of Philistine, God. I want you. I want all of you. Just tell him in that moment right now. God, I want you. I'm tired of my addiction. I'm tired of my debt. I'm tired of just cheating on my family. I'm tired of being the person that you didn't create me to be. God, move in me and make me a new person right now. I don't want Joe's story. I want your story. Tell him that in this moment. And know that he is leaving the 99 for you. God, would you move in this moment? Would you draw people as we sing and worship? God, would you help people make Nazirite commitments right now, that they would just leave their phone, that they would leave their desires, that they would leave the person that has distracted them from their family, that God, anything and everything that they're going through that is their Philistine, God, would you help them to get away from it and start to live your story again. I ask these things in your name, God. We are desperate for you to move in this moment, because as we've seen, God, man-made power just doesn't get it done. Work in this moment, God. Break hearts, humble hearts. God, leave that 99 and just tell us in this moment we are the one. In your name I pray, amen.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You've been so, so good to me. I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so, so kind. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found these 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found these 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.
I know what the intention and sometimes the accidental thoughts we have in this moment. This is one of them. Man, I've been a Christian for a long time, man. I'm really glad that doesn't apply to me. Oh, what a lie. We all have a Philistine. And the moment we think it doesn't apply to us, we sit in the same moment that Samson sat in the home of Delilah. That I'll just get up like as before and I'll be just fine. But you are not just fine. You're probably in a more dangerous place right now if you think everything's fine than if you're the person in here that thinks that you have no hope. Because at least the person with no hope is grasping for the hand of Jesus which is the only thing that can save us. So I would encourage you, if you're sitting here right now and you're going, man, it didn't apply to me, man, you need to reread that and rethink about that and really consider, what are my Philistine moments? Because maybe you don't have a drug addiction, maybe you're not an alcoholic, maybe there's not porn on your computer, but maybe you struggle with anger, or maybe fear, or anxiety. Maybe you struggle with somebody that nobody would understand, but God would understand. Maybe you're just giving up on life and you've quit trying. And in that split moment, within a moment, that's going to catch up with you here real soon. And you need to start trying again and being who God's called you to be. As you leave today, we're going to give you a takeaway card. We do this every Sunday. It's a takeaway card, and it's a card that's going to ask you some hard questions. And here's the takeaways you should get today. That God created you with a unique story, that He pinned something special just for you. And when we walk into Philistine lands, we affect that story. Because stories can change with just one choice. And we never know the split-second choice that will change our life. Number 2, here's some questions I want you to go home with. And here's the questions that I really want you to take this card and really consider on your own as you're just spending some time with God. Who's writing your story right now? Is God writing your story, or are you writing it? Because if you're writing it, there's a good chance you're in Philistine land right now. Number 2, what does your Philistine territory look like? Have you identified it? And are you spending a lot of time there? Visiting frequently? What do you stand to lose if your next split-second choice is a Samson-type decision? If you keep on the road that you're on, what's going to be the outcome? And number 4, are you living out that hard choice right now? And if you are, do you realize that God has not finished writing your story? And though maybe you sacrificed a little bit, there's a whole lot that He still wants to write, that He will reclaim you, and He will reuse you, and He will do mighty things through you if you stop right now and don't get caught up in the next moment within a moment. Grab one of these on your way out. Really look at it and search your heart and know that, man, I am so passionate to see you fall madly in love with God. And the only way we'll do that is take a Nazirite vow. Don't eat the grapes. And set ourselves apart to receive what God has chosen for you and for me. Have an awesome week. See you next one in North Room.